Well met, everyone. I am Rich the Lich, and today I'm going to take you through my thought process of building a boss fight. Real quick, we'll just pop up on screen a creature that I pulled off of the Monster Manual, or from D&D Beyond at least. We've got this Kamadan thing, this leopard with snakes on it. Here's its stat block. If we look through it very quickly, normal armor class, quite a bit of hit points, so he's got almost 70 hit points, normal speed, stats, whatever, nothing to write home about there. Keen smell, you can handle that any way you want. It has this pounce ability where if he hits with that, he gets to use a bonus action to do some additional attacks and knock you prone. So that's a big deal there. And then just base default, he's got multi-attack, bite and claw. The snakes are their own separate attack thing. And the important part there is even though the damage that the snakes, the bite and the claw is not very high, if those snakes hit, and you fail a saving throw, you're taking 6d6 poison damage. That's a lot. The other thing he has is he has something called Sleep Breath. It's a one-time thing. This is not like a Dragon's Breath weapon where you have a recharge number. He just uses it. It recharges after a short or a long rest, so he's only going to use it once. But it hits everyone in a cone, and if you fail that con saving throw, you fall asleep. You're unconscious, which is a big deal. So let's just churn through this thing, and let's talk through creating a boss fight. One of the most important elements when you're dealing with a boss fight is using a lair. Now, it doesn't have to be a boss that has, or a creature that has legendary actions. They don't have to have lair actions, but just use and incorporate the environment into your combat. So for the sake of this, one thing that this thing kind of talked to me about and I was looking at is when I saw this guy, I thought of like the Jungle Book. I thought of the environments that you'd find in like an Uncharted or a Tomb Raider. So El Dorado, right? Very Mayan, temple-ish type of thing. So let's pretend that this guy is the guardian of some sort of temple. And he's sitting up there on sort of this rocky shelf. Like at the top of the staircase, there's a platform. So there's certain elements there where maybe the steps are precarious. You know, you can fall up or down them depending on your vantage point and how far down the steps you are. You can't be too far away because you just don't have this football field of battle mat, right? If you're too far or you're down at the bottom of the stairs, you can't see the monster up above. So you automatically create a certain level of distance and terrain space. So we're going to talk through 5 stages. They're right here on screen. So stage 1 is your meet and greet. Stage 2 usually happens during the first few rounds. Stage 3 is the big attack. Stage 4 is what is the creature trying to do in order to survive, to endure, to make this combat drag out a little longer. And then stage 5 is what I like to call corpse explode. Does something happen when you kill the beast, assuming the PCs win the fight? Now, when we're dealing with stages, one way to kind of simply through math determine when you should move from one stage to the next is you can always just use hit points. If this guy has 70 hit points, what does that come out to mathematically for 5 stages? Somewhere around 12 to 15 hit points, right? 70 divided by 5. Stage 1 happens immediately, right away. Before, maybe even before initiative has been rolled. Stage 2, after about 12 to 15 hit points has been done. Stage 3, and you get it. It kind of flows in that sort of manner. You can use that for just simple math, right? Something with 100 hit points. Every 20 hit point block, a new stage happens. That kind of comes from video game mechanic stuff, where when the beast is at 50% or less hit points, it gets bloodlust, and damage output is increased by 4 times, and you know what I mean? The environment starts to rattle, and all sorts of things like this, right? It's very familiar. So that's one way to do it. There are other ways that you can kind of wrangle through when one stage moves to the next stage, but just try and block it out so that different things happen at different points in the encounter. Let's look through stage 1 very quickly. The first bullet point, you want to provide clues. What do I mean by that? You want to give some indication as to what the threat is here and things that the PCs need to pay attention to. Okay? You say that this guy comes out, and you can see that there's these snakes and they move around, and you notice that they kind of lash out at the nearby, you know, archways and stone doorway that's there. And you notice though the leopard, he kind of growls and moves to the right. And what you're maybe doing there is by providing these clues, you're indicating that they're independent. So that might already inform the players that, okay, there's at least 2 attacks here. The snakes are doing their own thing and the leopard is doing its own thing. Yes, the snakes are physically attached to the body of the leopard, so wherever the leopard is, that's where the snakes are, but you definitely indicate through some clues there, based on just some explanation and description, that these are independent things. Another thing you can talk about is you can start alluding to some of the environmental concerns that the PCs may have. you notice that there is an archway, sort of a keystone that seems to be holding a bunch of loose, ragged stones. As the leopard kind of pounces, though he's quiet and agile and dexterous, it kind of hits and it reverberates through this, ancient temple, this chamber. And you notice those stones sort of rattle. But what you're doing is you're providing clues and you're telling the players, hey, pay attention to what's going on up above. And it gets the PCs thinking through some tactical elements. The next bullet point you want to look at, and this is all in stage 1, is you want to confirm lethality. You want to give some indication that of sort of the level of danger, the level of threat. Right? One way you can do this is you can use some sort of prisoners or some other beasts that are not a part of the fight, but they're a part of they are a part of this description phase. Perhaps there's this sort of rotted, half-undead polar bear in the corner, and he's stuck. It's kind of wedged into these rocks. And this leopard, this Kamadan, is waiting for it to die so that he can feed on its carcass. And perhaps it's there in the corner. And what you say is, as you come upon, you crest the steps and you get onto this platform, you notice that one of the rocks just shifts and falls and crushes this polar bear. The PCs may sort of think through, that polar bear is probably more resilient. Even though I know he was maybe injured and trapped, he's more resilient than I am. And that rock just crushed and killed him. But you inform to them the lethality of the rocks. Don't stand in the fire. Stay away from the rocks. That's a major threat. Give them some indication of not how dangerous and what the overall CR and challenge of the encounter is, but more to the point of what are the different elements that they really need to watch out for that are really high points of danger. You want to get them thinking through that. And then the last one is establish the win condition. That one can kind of be self-explanatory. If you know this guy is not going to talk to you and you're not going to parlay, the win condition with him is kill him before he kills you. But if you have a situation where the PCs are approaching this point and all they're tasked to do is to retrieve this shield for the ancient dwarves, and they notice up on a ledge 30 feet above, there's the shield. It's just sitting there. Yes, this thing might be the guardian and he's not going to willingly let them get there, but you establish the win condition up front. Remember, a lot of this is happening in stage 1, which might be before initiative is even rolled. So use description. That's the other element of a boss fight that separates it from a normal fight, is you can take more time to over-explain and describe the situation here. It's not just, hey, roll initiative, let's see what happens. There's a lot of moving parts and things that have happened here. But by indicating that they see the shield up above, the rogues might start to think, you know what, if there's a way that I might be able to climb up there and get that, while the tanks are doing their tanky stuff, distracting the monster, I might be able to get that shield and just simply say, hey guys, I've got what we need, let's get out of here. So now that changes the dynamics of the fight. So sort of establish what they need to do for mission accomplished, okay? So that's stage 1 stuff. Stage 2, and some of this is fluid. You'll notice with stage 2, I often will come back to stage 2 throughout the numerous stages that are here. I have 5 stages here, but I'll often go back and forth to stage 2 at multiple times. So for stage 2, now what we want to look at is, as it says there in the black box, this happens, initiative has been rolled. This maybe happens within the first round. Maybe within the first 2-3 rounds at most, depending on how it goes, right? I run 9 players, so 3 rounds, everything that's going to happen has sort of already happened. So I need to establish this stuff up front. But this is not in DM monologue. We haven't rolled initiative yet. As we start to fight, I want to quickly start to judge the pace. I want to judge the overall, just the feel of the group at this point. Maybe as this is my boss fight, this guy comes out and the first round happens and things are moving, but I notice that half of my group is already on their phone, or they're just not as engaged. It may just illustrate to me that this boss is not all that it was cracked up to be. You know what I mean? And you may need to make some changes. Perhaps it can be done just before initiative has been rolled, but just before the first PC or the first person acts that round, where you see this monster and your players. So that's the big key there, is you're not looking at how the characters and the PCs are reacting. Look at the reaction of your players, right? Use that poker face element and see how they're responding to that. If it doesn't look like there's a lot of wonder and awe and like, oh my gosh, what are we up against? This encounter may fall flat. So there's nothing wrong with just having in prep time sort of a backup plan. Maybe having another monster sheet. And what happens if you have this thing and then your PCs just aren't as excited as you are about it? And all of a sudden, you hear this, and there's this massive crack as this clawed red hand, this fist of doom, just punches through. And we're talking Hulk size relative to like Captain America. This massive fist of doom comes through and then poking its head through that little hole that was already made. You see this, it's the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, right? Just this massive car-sized head of Diablo, Balrog, pit fiend head with horns. Think of the demon from Legend, the Tom Cruise 1980s movie. That thing pours through this hole, and it grabs this Kamadan, and then just shoves it into his mouth. That's your boss. Yes, you've had to plan that, and you've had to use that as a backup, but you've now changed sort of the pace and the overall energy of the encounter. Okay? When we look at these bullet points, that was a little bit extreme, but you get where I'm going with it. When we look at the bullet points, you need to kind of determine in this sort of first few rounds, stage 2, how fast is this going to, come about? Did I perhaps overtune this? Is this going to be too difficult? Is it too easy for the PCs or too easy for the monster? Maybe you fudge dice. I don't. I have my dice tray out in the open and I just roll. Whatever comes up, comes up. If I happen to be hot that night and I'm rolling 20s, I might TPK the group. Even if it's a trivial battle, I let the dice decide. So you can fudge dice. Another thing you can do is you can maybe adjust hit points. Remember, the goal here in the early stage, the first round or so, is really judging, is this meeting the overall energy level and pace that you wanted this boss fight to meet? That's why I said you might come out with a different monster, but by fudging dice, by adjusting hit points, things like that, you're adjusting the difficulty of the encounter a little bit right there on the fly so that it really feels like it's a boss fight. It becomes something that's memorable versus like, that's it. That was anticlimactic, right? So I say adjust hit points, just give him double the hit points. Give this guy 133 hit points or something like that. Or maybe you nerf it and he only has 28 hit points because you feel like he just wiped out 2 party members in the first round of combat. You might need to make some adjustments. Notice I said adjust hit points, not AC. When you make the AC a lot higher, what you do is you start creating a situation where your PCs just keep missing. And that always sucks. It's better for them to be able to do what it is they want to do, but just feel like they have to churn through this meat shield than just constantly missing. Okay, that's never exciting. Another thing you can do to kind of adjust the pacing of the combat is spawn more. If the wizard is sitting in the back and he feels like he has just full autonomy and carte blanche to just sit there and just throw nukes all day with no harm or threat because the tanks are doing a good job of keeping the monster in front of them, maybe all of a sudden you see 3 snakeheads poke out from the left and 2 more, his cubs, the children of this creature come out from the side, and you can tell they kind of lurch down and are ready to pounce on the wizards. You've now given what I like to call sort of the Overwatch thing, right? When Mercy's sitting in the back and is just getting assaulted constantly by Winston, eventually Mercy's going to say, hey, Reaper, can you come back here and help defend me, please? Some of the tanks might need to pull away to protect the more vulnerable PCs back there when you have additional monsters. Okay? Don't introduce them in the beginning. Remember, you're using stage 2 to judge the flow and the pacing. If you don't need to, then leave them separate right now. Keep them hidden. Okay? Another bullet point here is you can say that the monster simply spends 1 round focusing. Perhaps they kind of, lurch down or hunch down and they're ready to pounce, and you can tell the eyes almost turn red and they fixate. Maybe there's even laser beams, whatever you want to do. They fixate on the bard or what you determine as the weakest member of the party. Now, you need to kind of finagle your way through this depending on the intelligence of the monster. Don't do this with all your monsters because not everything can tell who the most vulnerable PC is. But you can say that he kind of hunches down and he's ready to pounce. And what you do is you create this element of tension and suspense where the PCs think, this dude is about to kill that guy. Hey, what does that mean? Why is he doing that? But here's the interesting part. You're not actually doing anything. You just made up that ability. There is no ability there. What you're doing is you're buying the PCs an extra round, or at least a round that is less lethal, because you just throw away his round and say, you could tell he spends sort of his ready action or his bonus and action to just kind of hone in on one guy and single out one individual PC. He's not really doing anything. You get them to be scared of that, but you're just buying them time by having him not do anything for that round. So that's another way you can adjust the pacing and the flow of the combat and being able to extend this over the duration that you intend it to by simply saying, this thing is too powerful. I need to give a round off in favor of the PCs. And that's one way you can do it. And then, of course, you can use environmental hazards. You can increase or decrease, whether you increase or decrease the lethality. So if I need to ramp this up and say, you know what, I think this encounter is just way too easy. I think they're going to kill this guy in a round or two. That's going to be an anticlimactic battle. All of a sudden, massive rocks fall. And as I said with that polar bear, they fall. And when they hit, you can tell that's like 10D. You know, you're not hitting the PCs, but just roll 12d6 and say, oh, okay. And you notice there's just a large crater. For your PCs, they're just thinking, okay, he rolled damage to see if that did enough damage to create a hole, which might create difficult terrain. Thank God it didn't hit one of the PCs. But by rolling all those dice, you bring about this element of lethality. Or maybe you decrease it, right? There's a keystone that you can tell. It looked like it was about to fall, but it sort of wedged all the other loose rocks above it. So now you don't think the threat of falling rocks, you know, rocks fall, everyone dies. You don't think that threat is going to happen early on. The environment seems pretty stable. You can increase or decrease that. You can also increase or decrease the frequency. Instead of like, hey, before it was supposed to be 1d4 rounds, a giant rock falls and maybe hits someone. Now, after every turn, rocks are falling. So you can play with the environment to increase or decrease the difficulty and the flow and overall pace and energy of your encounter. Okay? Let's take a look at stage 3. So remember, if we were breaking this up into 5s and dividing, this is about the time when the monster is down to about 50% of his hit points. Okay? You don't always have to use 5 stages. Break it up however you want, right? Because if you use 4 stages, you just simply say at the first 25%, that's stage 1. So early on, before encounters even happen, the monster's at full. After he loses a quarter of his hit points, we start thinking about stage 2 stuff. Is this fight going long enough? When he's down to 50% or less in the last half of his hit points, we're now in stage 3, right? You can break up the stages as you want. But stage 3 is kind of that halfway point. Now we want to start using these big attacks. Remember, even though we're not working through the actual mechanical bits here, this guy had a sleep breath. When I say big attacks, I'm not just talking about finding what action or trait or attribute is the most powerful, you know, the dragon's breath weapon, but just empty the tank. That's what I mean by stage 3 and big attacks. Just don't hold back anymore. He's halfway down. Don't hold back anymore. Okay? Or perhaps it's the other way around. The group is halfway down. There's 6 PCs and there's only 3 left by this stage. Maybe that's what sort of triggers stage 3. And when I say big attacks, the monster's just sort of going to empty the tank where, yes, he's trying to finish the battle. He smells blood. But he's also dumping all of his resources. So if they survive this onslaught of these big attacks of stage 3, they're probably going to win the battle at that point, okay? And you don't have to always use the biggest thing. In this particular case, this guy has this sleep breath. Because it's a cone, I would use that at any stage. Obviously not before initiative has been rolled. That's kind of just unfair. But I would use that at any stage in the combat. Use it when it's most advantageous tactically. Whenever the PCs line up the most to get the most people in that 30-foot cone, unleash that sleep breath. So that's not what I'm talking about with stage 3 and big attacks. I'm just talking about emptying the tank and just getting rid of all of its resources, okay? And here you notice the 2 bullet points really adhere to the intelligence here at this point. If this thing is a very high intelligence creature, during stage 3, that big attack might be, I'm now honed in, because he's smart enough, like a lich or something like that, I'm honed in on the weakest point of the group. Whoever the weakest character is, whoever is on death's door. That might be, I'm now going to attack everyone that's down. It automatically just ramps up, right? Just like it would in a video game. The moment you reach 50%, you know, you see that bar in World of Warcraft raid fights. He's at 51%, guys. The moment it hits 50% or 49%, everyone kind of has that sense of trepidation where it's like, oh shit, what's about to happen? Here it comes, here it comes. Especially if it's the first time you're doing it, of course, right? So for him, that's when the PCs realize, you know what, guys? We can't afford to just attack this thing anymore. We need to use Spare the Dying. We need to do whatever we need to stabilize these dudes. Because when that thing triggers, he's now going for everyone that's downed, and he's automatically making them fail death saves. Okay, that's what a high-int creature might do. A low-int, he's just going to empty the tank. He doesn't know who the greatest threat is. He's got a 3 intelligence. I'm just going to do whatever is, again, you don't have to necessarily use the sleep breath because you use that when it's tactically advantageous to you, but he's just going to always try and use pounce. He's always going to try and get that claw attack, even if it means he's not disengaging and he's getting attacks of opportunity. You see what I mean by that? So he's kind of extending himself because he's at half hit points, right? He's just frenzied at that point, okay? So that's what big attacks is. Stage 4, this is where he's down to like the last 25% of hit points. Again, if we're using the hit point system of delineating when one stage transitions to the next. Now, that's based on survival. He's doing what he can to sort of, it's not necessarily give up, where now it's a chance to parlay. Because again, in the very beginning, we've established the win condition. Kill it before it kills you. This guy's going to fight to the death. But maybe now he's going to try and use cover. He's just doing what he can. He's not just thinking of, as he did, it's a great contrast to stage 3. He's not just trying to kill them as fast as possible anymore. He's now trying to just survive. And if that means he needs to spend a round to disengage and back up and use cover, that's where he is. But what that does, if the PCs don't know what hit points he's at, you create, just like you would in a video game, when they're bloodied, like this thing is frenzied. He's got blood in his eyes. He's now bloodlusted. He's probably almost half dead. Stage 4, when he backs up and goes into cover, you've indicated to the players that, guys, we almost got him. He's starting to try and go into survival mode. Like, he's got to be down to his last quarter of life, that type of thing. And it's okay to do this with every boss fight. Even if it sort of reveals your hand to them and they kind of anticipate this, where, oh, he's backing up, he's down to 1/4. Because the manner of what these bullet points are is going to vary from boss fight to boss fight. So there's still a large element of surprise and unique elements to it. So maybe this thing just backs up now and gets into cover. Maybe the environment becomes a significant threat at this point, and it's not him that's the threat. The environment helps to distract the PCs from killing him, because now they're dealing with falling rocks, and it's now created this wall in front of them, and now they need to worry about climb checks and all sorts of things like this. The bridge is going out, that type of stuff, right? Or maybe you straight up video game mechanic, and this thing just, what is the imp? Anytime they want. He just disappears, and you don't know if he's going to come back at stage 1 again. That's very video game-esque. But you just give that element of, of thought process in there, and it makes the PCs feel like this thing has multiple aspects to it, and it feels very boss-like, okay? And then your last stage is, I'm known for this, and when I say I'm known for this, I haven't done it that much, but does this thing go out with a bang? What happens when you kill this thing? Some abomination thing once exploded when they killed it, and it caused like 66 poison damage to everything within the area. So now every time my PCs are about to kill something, like, dude, everybody get away. We don't know what's going to happen, right? So does it go out with a bang, literally, or not? Maybe nothing happens when you kill it. Perhaps you deplete resources other than hit points. Maybe you just create this element of the environment where the minute you kill it, it's just, and it starts to shrivel on itself, and it just draws all this ambient energy as it sucks, very God of War or whatever, sucks this life force from the entire area. And as you kill it, every one of my casters, anyone with spellcasting feature, roll a d4. Whatever your result is, that's how many spell slots you lose, right? So you just create this lasting effect by killing it. You don't have to. You don't have to do this every time. But that last stage is answer that question of what happens when they deal the killing blow. I know there's a lot to chew on there. And as I said, it's very, in the brainstorm thought process stage. But it's just some ways of really making, as I went through that, I just made this CR4 guy so much more than maybe what he might have been written to do. So always incorporate some sort of environment. And play with these stages. Again, they're fluid, right? Move through them as you need, especially stage 2, always kind of considering. Now, at some point when it's into rounds 4 or 5 or you're in further stages, you don't need to adjust. You don't need to fudge anymore. You don't need to change hit points anymore, things like that. Just let it be as it is, because you've gone past that point where it's now an encounter that everyone's going to remember. It isn't just going to end in round 1. The stage 2 part kind of happens early on. But I'm always at least sort of aware of the energy and the pacing of my fight as I move through these stages. But you start to build up this certain sense of predictability. But you also, I think when it's predictability, it's not as though you're trying to make every fight the same. You're just trying to indicate to the PCs that it becomes predictable that they immediately identify and say, this is a boss, guys. I know he said on paper that's what the boss looked like, but it may be a boss that you didn't allude to ahead of time. Like, they're not just going and, they read or they learn from these nearby elves that at the ancient temple, there is this leopard with snakes guardian. Okay, they know that's the boss. But maybe just an encounter happens in the middle of travel along the road, and then as you start churning through some stages, your PC's quick, wait, whoa, guys, this is a boss fight. Where the hell did this boss come from? And I think that's where you can really bring about a lot of interest in your games and your campaigns. So just kind of think through that a little bit. I hope it helped. Hope everyone is doing well, staying creative, staying safe, and all that good stuff. So again, as always, more videos to come. That's all I have for today. Thanks everyone for watching, and take care.